Hey everyone, we're going to get the reveals for the new Sorcerer today, and I'll edit this part out if they don't cover this, but I will say if you weren't following the playtest, you're going to see some pretty significant changes to the main class, and if you were following the playtest, definitely stick around to hear what happened with subclasses, because all 4 subclasses have had revisions that you have not seen yet in the playtest, and that worked to balance them out some more, I think. Now, I have read the new Player's Handbook, and in these videos, what I do is I watch for Todd and Jeremy to reveal new information so I can talk about it. And sometimes D&D Beyond posts class articles soon afterwards. So as long as it's there, I check that out too for any additional information it might give. But on August 1st, I will start dropping some real details about the changes to rules and spells and feats, including exact wording that's going to be up on the screen. So if you aren't subscribed already, make sure you do so you don't miss out when that happens. And then tomorrow will be the Cleric reveal video, and then the Bard on Thursday. So I'm just going to brew my coffee, and then let's hear what Jeremy and Todd have to say about the Sorcerer.
Hello everyone, today we are talking about the Sorcerer. We have lots of new things to talk about. We've got a new table, we've got some very big improvements for subclasses. Let's dive in.
The Sorcerer has had a number of exciting transformations. This is the class for the person who was either born with the magic or an event happened and transformed them. This is the closest in some ways we get in D&D to having a class that's almost like a superhero, a person who just has innate powers. We wanted to enhance that theme in a variety of ways, and you can see that right away at first level in the class with a brand new feature called Innate Sorcery. Innate Sorcery allows the Sorcerer to spend a bonus action, basically burst with their innate magic, and while this phenomenon goes on, the spell save DC of their sorcerer spells increases by 1, and they have advantage on any attack roll they make as a part of a sorcerer spell. When designing it, we thought of it essentially as the sorcerer's rage. It has a very different role in the class from rage, but it is a similar kind of thing of just suddenly, like, rah!
You're powering up.
I'm powering up. And we wanted to give people this feature right away because this feature shows, especially when you put the new Warlock next to the new Sorcerer, next to the new Wizard, it's very clear, looking at even just their first level, how distinct each of the 3 arcane spellcasters are from each other. Now, the spellcasting feature of the Sorcerer has also...
Okay, so Innate Sorcery, if you were following the playtest, you've already seen this feature. But of course, if you weren't following the playtest, Sorcerers in 2014 had kind of a reputation of being weak. Now, I didn't necessarily think they were weak compared to, barbarians, but the natural thing you're going to compare them to is to wizards. And wizards are, at least in 2014, the most powerful class in the game. So sorcerers didn't look so good in comparison. So adding in little things like this innate sorcery feature that improves the DC of their spells and their attack rolls with their spells helps to make the sorcerer look better against the wizard. Because before it was just meta magic, which is good, but it just wasn't enough to close that gap between those 2 classes.
Been improved. As we've done in our other dedicated spellcasters who have cantrips, we've made it so that you can change one of your cantrips whenever you level up. Again, cantrips used to be like a perma-choice. You chose it, and that was that for the rest of your career. When you get to 2nd level, you get Font of Magic and Meta Magic at that same level now. For those of you who are not familiar with the Sorcerer, Font of Magic is the feature that gives you your sorcery points. These are points that you use to unlock various magical effects, and that can include turning some of those points into spell slots, It can include taking spell slots and turning them into sorcery points. But one of the main ways that you use your sorcery points is on metamagic. And metamagic is a signature feature for sorcerers, just as Eldritch Invocations are a signature for warlocks. Metamagic options allow the sorcerer to modify spells as the sorcerer casts them.
Yeah.
And we have revisited every one of the metamagic options, fine-tuned them, shared a lot of that retuning with folks through Unearthed Arcana, got feedback, and now we have the final slate here for sorcerers to use, along with a couple of new options that appeared originally in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And so that all means that now sorcerers have an even better metamagic kit than they did before, that they can also combine with their innate sorcery burst, which gets better than at higher levels. At 5th level, you get Sorceress Restoration, which now lets you get sorcery points back a bit easier than you could before. Then at level 7, you have a new feature called Sorcery Incarnate, which allows you to spend sorcery points to get uses of innate sorcery back.
Yeah.
So if you've run out of your power-up ability, well, now you can use sorcery points to get it back. We've also now made it so that starting at level 7, while your innate sorcery is active, you can now use 2 of your metamagic options on each spell instead of the normal 1, because typically, when a sorcerer casts a spell, they can only use 1 metamagic option at a time on that spell. Although there are a few exceptions. There's some specific metamagic options that can piggyback on other metamagic options. But again, at level 7 now, all sorcerers gain the ability that while they're powered up with their innate sorcery, to double up on metamagic options.
And if you were following the playtest, that was in the playtest as well.
Then at level 20, they get what is probably my favorite new name for a feature in the new player's handbook. They get Arcane Apotheosis. And simply because apotheosis is such a delicious word to say.
Yeah.
And what this now lets you do is when your innate sorcery feature is active, on each of your turns, you can use a metamagic option without spending sorcery points at all. And so what this means is, in addition to its base improvements for you, innate sorcery over time will just turn you as a sorcerer into a metamagic machine because you will just start being able to modify your spells in more ways and doing it for free, which then also has the carry-on effect of allowing you to stretch out your sorcery points more. So in addition to us giving you more ways to get your sorcery points back, we've also made it so that by the time you reach level 20, you're essentially getting sorceress coupons all over the place, so that you're able to do more and more things without spending as many points as you would have had to in the past.
Perfect.
So all of this together means that the sorcerer class itself, which already was all about sort of customization on the fly, given how sorcerers use metamagic, you now have that in spades. Also, just as an aside, a sort of meta commentary, if people want to think about how the sorcerer and the warlock in particular relate to each other, or rather contrast with each other, we think in many ways of the warlock as the arcane spellcaster, where you have a ton of customization choices at character creation and as you level up. I mean, it is supremely customizable. The sorcerer, in contrast, is about customization in the moment.
Right.
So while it does not have the same amount of build versatility as the warlock, it has a tremendous amount of tactical versatility. And then their companion in the arcane triad, the wizard, is all about just being the most versatile with the most number of spells.
Yeah.
And so the three of them together then fill really distinct niches.
Yeah, I'm actually going to comment on something he said there. So he's kind of glossed over a lot of stuff here, so I don't have a lot of specifics to talk about. Like he breezed through the sorcerer, but one thing he did mention is how you have the warlocks are customizable through the character options. Then you've got the sorcerers customizable in the moment using meta magic and sorcery points. Well, the wizard is more customizable because they have more spells. And there has been a lot of talk that maybe the sorcerer is just better than the wizard now. Because they're giving them more spells known. You got an Aberrant Mind and Clockwork with extra spells, and sorcerers now can cast rituals, right? But do keep in mind, look at your 2014 Player's Handbook. Look at the spell list for sorcerers. Look at the spell list for wizards, and you will see that there are spells on that wizard spell list that sorcerers don't have access to, that are super juicy premier options. And so you need to keep that in mind as well when you're comparing these two classes.
Together as the arcane trio. Shall we dive into the subclasses?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah,
First off, we've got...
Okay, so we're already into the subclass. So they really just went through that very quickly. Not a lot of details. I was hoping they would confirm where they landed with metamagic and stuff like that. And we did not get that. So I will be checking the D&D Beyond, see if they put up an article. If so, I'll insert anything additional that they gave. Otherwise, the subclasses have some interesting stuff. So they still have a fair bit amount to talk about here.
Aberrant Sorcery. This is the Tentacles, Engu, Cosmic Horror. One of my favorites from Tasha's by far. Tell me what has improved here.
So Aberrant Sorcery and Clockwork Sorcery both migrated in from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And they were so beloved in that book and so solid that they have made the migration intact. So each of them are going to feel very familiar and cozy for anyone who has played them before. Now, in the process, we have made a few tweaks, but mostly they're clarification tweaks, and mostly about making sure that these two subclasses integrate in with the new player's handbook as seamlessly as possible. And so people will see there are some wording changes, some details, but the core functionality that you love, whether it's your GUI Aberrant Sorcerer or your Order-powered Clockwork Sorcerer, the things you love are still there. Because again, these two subclasses were so solid and also really are a nice thematic contrast to the Draconic Sorcerer and the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Those were the two that were in the 2014 Player's Handbook. And these two, like so many of the other subclasses that we've added to the Player's Handbook roster, help fill out a quartet. You can think of the Aberrant Sorcerer as being a companion to the Draconic Sorcerer in that in the Player's Handbook, these are the two sorcerers who are associated with types of monsters. They are, in some ways, you can almost think of them as the monstrous sorcerers.
Right.
And one of them, and it's interesting, they both have to do with creatures that often have scales. But again, with the Draconic Sorcerer, it's associated with the most iconic creatures in our game, dragons, who have a mystical connection with the material plane, in contrast to Aberrant Sorcery, which is connected to the tentacle and star and horror-filled far realm, which is basically as far away from the material plane as you can get. And so these two, the Aberrant Sorcerer and the Draconic Sorcerer, in a way represent two extremes on the monstrous sorcery axis. This is in contrast to the Clockwork Sorcerer and the Wild Magic Sorcerer, who are really about order and chaos, with the Clockwork Sorcerer being all about tapping into the magic of planes like Mechanus to impose order through their innate magic on reality.
Yeah, I love how each of these have such distinct personality. Because again, not only butted up against Wild Magic Sorcery, but also really Aberrant Sorcery too, because you have this thing that could be amorphous and blobbish and scales and unknowable, and this is imposed order and everything must be known. So it's just a nice through line with all of them.
I love that these four now coexist together in the player's handbook. And then the two new subclasses are then accompanied by the returning subclasses, Draconic Sorcery and Wild Magic Sorcery, that have some significant new elements in them.
Well, let's get...
Okay, so I think that's it for Aberrant and Clockwork, is mostly just talk about how they contrast to Draconic and Wild Magic, and he says basically they're, other than minor tweaks, they're the same. There's more to say here. And what I will say is that, in my opinion, I think objectively, not my opinion, that's the wrong thing to say. Objectively, there has been a power reduction in both classes. And I will get into specifics when I can.
Into the Draconic Sorcerer, which was always a beloved one.
Oh, yeah. So the Draconic Sorcerer is, in many ways, the iconic sorcerer subclass, particularly because dragons have been a part of the backstory of the sorcerer class, going back to the class's introduction in 3rd edition. And so it was always important to us that in 5th edition, we retain that draconic element and to honor the class's origin back in 3rd edition. And so what we've done here is we have really amped up the draconic angle of this subclass. So first off, you're going to see that we have sort of remixed several of the elements so that you still have what you'd expect, like your increased resilience. You still have more hit points than the typical sorcerer. You also have, without wearing any armor, a higher armor class than the typical sorcerer. But now that's joined at 3rd level by a list of spells, which you did not have before.
Yeah, which did not exist before.
No, this is a brand new feature called Draconic Spells. And here, we were able to give you magic that will assist you in leaning full.
So a lot of people were wondering, because of course in the playtest, the Draconic Sorcerer did not have additional spells, so he's confirming there's additional spells. I'm just going to wait and see if they tell you what those spells are.
Into your dragon magic fantasy. And here we were able to really make use of the expanded spell chapter in this book. Here's some examples. We now are able to give you, right at 3rd level, the spell Dragon's Breath, because Dragon's Breath is one of the spells that has been added to the player's handbook. We also, I'm particularly excited about this, when you reach 9th level as a sorcerer and you have this subclass, you can now summon a dragon, which was not an option for the sorcerer in 2014, but because the brand new spell Summon Dragon is in the player's handbook, you can do what it says on the tin and now have a certain number of times per day a dragon buddy who's fighting alongside you.
That's amazing.
The Summon Dragon spell is a sort of new version of a summoning spell that we had in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and this one has been retooled to be appropriate for the core game. Now, we couldn't resist, so we kept going in enhancing this subclass. You still have the resistances.
Okay, so he's done talking about the spells. So he said you're going to get Dragon's Breath at level 3. You'll get Summon Dragon at level 9, which is from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. And there's a bunch more spells you're going to get. And I will just tell you that overall, I think the list is pretty solid. And obviously, I can't get into specifics, but there's good spells on this list, and some not great spells too. Like most of these lists, there's bits that are good, bits that are bad. But overall, I'd say it's a pretty solid list of spells that you're going to get. So people who are, wringing their hands that Aberrant Mind and Clockwork get these extra spells and Draconic does not get these extra spells, you now get extra spells. And I'd say the list for the Dragon is as good as the ones for Clockwork, and maybe even better than the ones for Aberrant Mind. Possibly.
It's also that were associated with the subclass, but now they don't cost sorcery points.
Yeah.
And so this will allow you to enjoy this benefit without having it be a drain on your sorcery point pool. We've also increased...
Now he told you what that specific thing was. I'm going to have to go back because I was so busy listening about spells. I just want to make sure he said what I think he said before I talk about it.
They don't cost...
Okay, so yeah, he did say. I just want to make sure he had said it was the resistance that doesn't cost sorcery points. So that was in the playtest, and most obvious change in the world, really. I don't know why they had... So in 2014, if you were a red dragon sorcerer, you could get resistance to fire, but you had to expend a sorcery point, and it lasted an hour. And there's so many things in the game that just give you resistance, including in the 2014 Player's Handbook. I'm not sure why they felt that it needed to be blocked that way. So very glad to see that it's how it's probably always should have been.
Sorcery points.
Yeah.
And so this will allow you to enjoy this benefit without having it be a drain on your sorcery point pool. We've also increased the speed of your dragon wings. Now, you're not going to be able to have them on all the time, but when you do have them on, you're going to be even faster than you were in 2014. Finally...
Okay, so there's a big reveal, and people are going to have to debate on whether this is better or worse. But Dragon Wings at level 14 in the Player's Handbook, you got, I think it was just speed 30 Dragon Wings, and they were there all the time. Then in the playtest, they kind of went back and forth. At one point, it was getting the wings was tied to concentrating on a lousy spell, and then they switched it, and they basically had you be able to turn on your Dragon Wings or off whenever you wanted. And now they are limited. So you're going to have limited use, and you will have a greater speed, a significantly greater speed. So whether that is better or worse is going to be up for debate. But just so you know, it has had significant change, though you still can fly.
At level 18, you have a brand new feature called Dragon Companion. Now, you already at level 9 started always having the Summon Dragon spell prepared. Well, when you reach level 18, building on that, you can now cast that spell without requiring its costly material component.
And there's something that just got confirmed, and I'm glad he said that. I don't even know if he really thought about it, but there's a lot of questions. The summoning spells from Tasha's were coming over, and Summon Dragon was coming over, and those spells have costly components that a lot of players don't like. And so there was question, will they get rid of those costly components? He's just explained that at least in the case of Summon Dragon, no, it still has a costly component unless you're, a super high level Draconic Sorcerer.
And you can also cast it without a spell slot once per day. And you also have the option of, when you cast it in this way, of not having to concentrate on it. You can have your dragon buddy out and be concentrating on another spell when you reach level 18. And so that means...
And we've seen that multiple times so far in other subclasses. So this is just a theme they've gone back to. The only difference is which spell. So you got your Fey Wanderer Ranger can cast Summon Fey without a spell slot, but it lasts a minute. Then you have your Great Old One Warlock could cast Summon Aberration without concentration, but it only lasts a minute. And now we have the Draconic Sorcerer being able to cast Summon Dragon without concentration.
Now, in addition to embodying draconic power yourself, you can have this dragon companion who is a literal dragon at your side. All of this together, to me, means we have the most draconic sorcerer that we've ever had.
So I have been in love with wild magic sorcery since I was a kid. I remember seeing it in 2nd edition in the Tome of Magic, and it just scratched an itch. It was the concept of pure chaos magic. And there is so much new in this subclass. Such dramatic improvements have been made.
So right away, the thing that people will see, and you got to see a preview of this in Unearthed Arcana, is we have removed the element in this subclass that essentially required you to get DM permission to have your wild magic happen. Now you just get to use your class feature. Now, there's still a unpredictable side to it, which is a core part.
Okay, so he's referring to the playtest we saw Tides of Chaos change significantly. So Tides of Chaos in the 2014 Player's Handbook says that you can give yourself advantage on an ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll, and once per long rest. And then it says, if the DM decides they can give it back to you at any time when you cast a sorcerer's spell of 1st level or higher, except it automatically triggers wild magic. But it doesn't say the DM should do that. And so if your DM doesn't know about it, they're definitely not going to do it, right? And, if they don't think about it, they're not going to do it. You'd almost have to make a social contract with the DM before you played a wild magic sorcerer. And you'd say, hey, I'm considering playing a wild magic sorcerer. If I use Tides of Chaos, will I get it back when I cast a leveled sorcerer spell? And then, some DMs would go, oh, I'm not really into wild magic. And then you go, okay, I'll play a different subclass. And then others would say, yeah, that's great. I love wild magic. If you use it, you're going to get it back. You no longer need that social contract. It is built into the class. And I honestly think wild magic was pointless without Tides of Chaos allowing you to recover and get that wild magic to trigger, because Wild Magic Surge, which is a 1 chance in 20 of wild magic going off, obviously only happens 5% of the time, which means 95% of the time when you cast a leveled spell, which is often, entire sessions and multiple sessions often, and you never, ever, ever get a Wild Magic Surge. And this is the subclass, right? Like, if you don't like wild magic, then don't play with it. But if you do like wild magic, you want it to happen. And this is their class feature, and it just wouldn't happen. And so it was like playing a sorcerer without a subclass. So having that switch, and I have playtested it multiple times, turned myself into a potted plant multiple times, but nevertheless, had a great time with it.
Part of this subclass's identity, but at least you now know that if the die rolls are kind to you, or unkind, depending on what you end up rolling, wild magic is going to happen, and you're always just waiting to find out when. So it now really is, it's just a question of when now, not if.
Yeah, because you can force its hand eventually.
Yes, which you could also do in 2014, but you have a bit more flexibility here, particularly because you can more easily get Tides of Chaos back than you could before.
Yeah.
And all of this means that you will be able to dip into this pool of chaos more reliably. So much so that when you get to level 18, we have a brand new feature for this subclass where you can, once per day automatically trigger a wild magic surge.
Yeah.
And you get to choose what happens.
Yeah.
And that's why this new feature is called Tamed Surge, that by level 18, you have figured out how to tap into your wild magic so effectively that you can look at the wild magic surge table and just, I'll have that happen. Now there are a couple of limits here. One is you cannot choose the final row in that table. Because
and in the playtest, you could. And I playtested a high-level Wild Magic Sorcerer, and the final option was, I believe, you recover all your sorcery points, which, when you are 18th level, can be a lot of sorcery points, especially if you convert all your sorcery points into spell slots, because you know you're going to use this feature, and then you can get 18 sorcery points back. So they had to get rid of that. Otherwise, it's the only option, right? It's just so much better than the other options. So they have removed that option, which is good. It shouldn't have been there because it became the only option, so you really didn't have an option.
That final row has some really juicy options that you only gain access to if the dice give you access to them. We've also made it so that if you choose a row on the table that itself has a die roll in it, you have to still make the die roll within that row. Now, where the majority, though, of the new material in this subclass exists is not actually in the features we've talked about.
Yes.
It's in the table.
It's amazing.
Yeah, okay. So the I figured he would probably mention this. So you might notice that they didn't say anything about additional spells for Wild Magic Sorcerer, because we know the Clockwork Sorcerer gets them. We know that the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer gets them. We know now that Draconic Sorcerer is going to get them as well. So what is going to make the Wild Magic Sorcerer be able to compete with them? The new Wild Magic table is. So they have redesigned it. Some of the old favorites are back, but a lot of the old not favorites are gone. And I would say your odds of getting something good to happen are significantly better now. Still bad things that can happen to you, but I don't want anyone to think that it means, wild magic's always going to be good for you. It's not. But before it was about 50-50, and it's not 50-50 anymore. Now, you want your wild magic surges, and there's a good chance that you'll be happy with the results. And there's still options that kind of don't do anything, right, other than flavor.
So I'm glad you think so.
Complete game changer for wild magic sorcery.
In Unearthed Arcana, people got to see the new features for this subclass.
Yeah.
And there's great feedback, a lot of excitement about the new features. But in UA, people were still using the Wild Magic Surge table from 2014. And my goodness, is everyone in for a treat, because
it's amazing.
Because the table has been redesigned from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And it still involves rolling percentile dice.
Yeah, it's still chaos.
Oh, in some ways it's even more chaotic than it was before.
Because you have more rolls that can happen within this roll.
Yes.
Things can really pop off.
Because we perhaps, feeling a game design wild magic surge, we decided to introduce even more chaos into the table.
Yeah.
Because, yes, as you say, you could roll something that then causes you to roll something. and so there is almost this, it's like you're watching, like, okay, where's it going to end up? And we've also...
Yeah, so what they're telling you there is that if you roll certain results, then there are going to be various options within that result, and you roll again to see which one of them happens. What it means is there are more possible results from wild magic than ever before. That's essentially what it boils down to.
We've packaged some of the options, so like all of the options that summon things are now together, and doing that now made room for us to introduce some brand new options. So you're not only going to see the options that were there remixed and moved around the table. There are brand new options here. Some are more powerful than options that were there before. Others lean into the whimsical side of the table. They're one of the options where if you get one of the rows and then you roll the die, you could even end up with a case that all of those options that transform the sorcerer could all hit the sorcerer at once.
Yeah.
And so there are just so many fun options here with so many different random possibilities because of the nested die rolls that Wild Magic Sorcerers are going to be the wildest they've ever been.
Previous Wild Surge tables have been a wee bit punishing. And certainly we still have, like, turning into a pod plant for a turn. That's still there.
Yeah, I noticed that because when I was playtesting, as I mentioned, I think in the same session, I turned into a potted plant twice. And I'm like, is that still there? Oh, it's still there.
Vulnerable to piercing damage. So things can go bad. But
Here's what I will say. And I think this is actually important to mention, is I looked at this Wild Magic Surge table, and as I said, good things can happen, meaningless things can happen, bad things can happen, but the one thing I definitely noticed is the chance of having bad things happen to your allies is much reduced. There is still, I think I noticed one possibility that could actually impact your allies in a negative way, but you definitely won't kill your allies like you could potentially with the old Wild Magic Surge table, especially at lower levels. Not anymore. So when it comes to, some other players don't always like it when somebody's playing a Wild Magic Sorcerer because, something could happen to their character that they don't want to happen. And that's completely valid. And so I am pleased to say that will be much less of a concern going forward.
But there's a lot more good, too.
Yes.
And so you channeling this Wild Magic Surge can cause something amazing and completely change an encounter. Maybe for the bad, but also for the good, and it does feel way more wild.
And one of our goals here was, to still have, there's that chance of something unwelcome happening.
He's setting everything on fire,
Right. But we wanted to shift the balance of the table a bit, so it was a little less about is something good or bad going to happen, and more about there's a small chance something bad will happen, but most likely something cool will happen.
Yeah.
And then what the uncertainty is, okay, whatever cool is going to happen, how is that now going to affect all of our tactical choices? So we wanted it to be much more about the fun of it, the unexpected of it, and lessen a little bit the dread of it, but there is still dangerous possibility because it is still a core part of the Wild Magic identity that this could go very wrong.
And these potentials are basically, for all intents and purposes, it's extended spell list because all the other sorcerers get one, but this is a lot of different options for different spell-like effects that might occur depending on how you roll.
Yes. We've even had internal folks who look at the 4 subclasses and they were wondering, did you forget the Wild Magic Sorcerer's spell list? Because the other 3 subclasses have a spell list.
They are the spell list.
And oh no, we did not forget. It's this D100 table, which has many other spells nested inside it.
Yeah.
So yes, anyone watching this video, if you're looking for the Wild Magic Sorcerer's spell list, take a look at that table and you have found it.
There's another ability halfway in there that existed before where you can make 2 rolls on the Wild Magic Surge table and choose which one you would prefer. So you have that progression of slowly getting a little bit more of the reins on chaos magic.
More reins on what is even more chaotic than it was before. And we did this not only for thematic reasons and for fun, but also because we made the change in the subclass itself that the sorcerer is going to be interacting with this table more often.
Yeah.
And because you're going to be interacting with this table more often, it was important to us that there be more possibilities.
Yeah.
Because we did not want you to sort of run through it too quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason why, as you found when you first looked through it for the first time, oh my goodness, is there a lot here?
Well, I finally get to use the big 100-sided die of mine. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this sorcerer and all the subclasses.
Thank you.
Okay, and that is the sorcerer. So the base class sorcerer, they went very, very quickly through it. In fact, I have a ping on my Discord. Okay, I can confirm that the sorcerer article is not out today. It's going to be out later this week. So I have no more details to share than they shared. He was very, very vague about the sorcerer in general, I thought. I'll tell you that there were changes to some of the stuff you saw in the playtest. And he just didn't really cover how they had changed, but there were. And he didn't really cover changes to Aberrant Mind and Clockwork. There were changes to Aberrant Mind and Clockwork. He talked about tweaks, and one of those tweaks is taking something that maybe was too powerful and bringing it down for both subclasses. So, in my opinion, Wild Magic and Draconic and Clockwork and Aberrant Mind are pretty well balanced against each other now. For me, I think I would be inclined to go for Wild Magic because it does seem fun. And it seems less dangerous and less annoying for other party members than it did before. So it kind of feels the most new to me. But if you are a fan of Clockwork or Aberrant Mind, know that they're mostly intact. And so, if you enjoyed them before, you'll still enjoy them. And Draconic is very iconic, right? Iconic subclass for Sorcerer editions past. And in fact, I think originally in 3rd edition when the Sorcerer was introduced, they were all descended from, they had a dragon somewhere in their ancestry, and that's why they were sorcerers. So it's very iconic, and so it has gotten boosted to the point where it really competes with the rest of the subclasses. And so if that's a favorite of yours, I think you will be happy with it. The Sorcerer is more powerful than it used to be. I'll say that as well. And whether it is better or worse than Wizards, I think it's close. I think they are very closely comparable now. And the same goes for Warlock. So you got the Warlock, Sorcerer, and Wizard. They're in tough competition for the top of the heap right now. Everybody else is catching up, right? Because there's things like weapon masteries and improvements to Indomitable and improvements to Rage and tick. And I like that because somebody's always going to be the most powerful and somebody's always going to be the weakest. But I want the gaps between them to be reduced. And I believe that has happened with the new classes and subclasses. And the rules in general, feats, spells, all that stuff. So pleased to say that tomorrow I'll be back and we'll talk about the cleric. And one thing I didn't like about the cleric, I will talk about that tomorrow. In the meantime, thanks everyone for watching. See you soon.